Molly Bish went missing in a mysterious way on the morning of June 27th. It was just an ordinary summer day when her mum, Magi Bish, dropped her off at work by a quiet lake where she worked as a lifeguard. Hours later, people started to notice she was gone. Her station was empty, her belongings were untouched, but there was no sign of Molly. Before we dive deeper, just a quick reminder, give a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps it grow and lets me keep making more content. Now, let's dive into today's story. Molly was born in August 1983, and she was the youngest daughter of John Bish, a justice official, and Maggie Bish, an elementary school teacher. The couple also had two older kids, Heather and John Jr. They originally lived in Detroit, Michigan, a big city with a high crime rate. But then a traumatic event changed their lives forever. A colleague of Maggie's was kidnapped and vanished without a trace, which sparked a lot of fear. So, John, Magi, and I decided we needed a safer place to raise our kids, so the family moved to Warren, Massachusetts. It's a small, peaceful town surrounded by countryside, with a really low crime rate. It was so quiet that it didn't even have its own police station. The latest report from 2022 showed about 5,000 residents and just a handful of violent crimes. It seemed like the perfect spot to live away from danger. What the family didn't realize was that even in this safe haven, evil was lurking. They quickly became a well-known and respected family in the community. John, through his work in the justice system, was seen as a trustworthy authority, and Magi was really popular with her students and colleagues. Molly stood out for her smarts and friendly personality. Even as a kid, she was super active in sports, playing soccer, baseball, basketball, and volleyball. She excelled in school and dreamed of becoming a teacher like her mum, but Molly had another passion, swimming. From ages 12 to 15, she tagged along with her older brother John Jr., who worked as a lifeguard at the Commins Pond, a lake that got really busy in the summer. During that time, she learned all the necessary techniques for water rescue and first aid. When John took another job in June 2000, she immediately stepped into his role. On June 27, 2000, Molly was getting ready for another workday when she got the shocking news that one of her friends had been in a bike accident on her way to work. Even though she was worried, Molly didn't want to miss out since it was the first day of summer swim lessons, and if she didn't show up, they might have to cancel. She rushed to get ready, and when she left the house, her mum let her drive to the lake by herself since Molly had just gotten her driver's license. Maggie wanted to help her gain more confidence behind the wheel. On the way, they stopped briefly at the local police station to pick up a walkie-talkie that Molly needed to alert the authorities in case of an emergency. Every day, she would grab the walkie-talkie before her shift and return it at the end of the day. The place Molly worked was a small man-made lake surrounded by thick woods, and the locals considered it a great spot to hang out. Fishing and hunting became popular in the summer, mainly with families looking for a quiet spot to swim and camp. Even though it was a recreational area, it was pretty isolated. If you didn't know the area well, you'd have a hard time finding it without good directions. When the clock struck 9:58, Molly and her mum arrived at the park entrance. Magi parked the car, and Molly grabbed her stuff. She said goodbye to her mum and headed to her spot, while Magi watched her go, unaware. This would be the last time she saw her daughter alive. 20 minutes later, at 10:02, the first visitor of the day arrived at the lake, a woman named Sandra, along with her kids and some friends. As soon as she parked the car, she noticed the lifeguard station was empty. She looked for Molly but couldn't find her anywhere. Gradually, more families arrived for swimming lessons, but no one knew where Molly was. At first, people thought she might have gone off to hang out or something. I took a walk around 11 o'clock, and an attending mother informed me that Molly's supervisor and the chairperson of the park commission had been notified. It was reported that the lifeguard had left her post and hadn't been seen since her arrival. When I got to the scene, I saw something that really worried me. Molly's belongings were right where they should be. Her bag was on the lifeguard chair, her flip-flops were neatly placed beside it, and her first aid kit was open as if she had just used it. Something was off about it. If she had left voluntarily, why would she leave everything behind? Molly grabbed her walkie-talkie and called the police at 11:44. What started as a typical missing person case quickly turned into a frantic investigation. Molly Bishop had vanished without a trace, and no one could figure out how that could happen in such a quiet place. When the police arrived at Commins Pond, they didn't initially find Molly's disappearance alarming. The authorities thought she could have just left without telling anyone, maybe to meet a friend or a date, but family and friends knew she would never do that. She never left her job without a good reason. A small search around the lake started but didn't turn up anything. Around 1 p.m., the family contacted the police to see if Molly was somewhere else. Her mum, Magi, immediately called her oldest daughter, Heather, and they rushed to the police station to find out what was going on. What happened was they got a vague explanation. Maybe Molly was with friends, or maybe she was taking care of her friend who had an accident and visiting her in the hospital. But Magi knew that wasn't true. To look for a clue, she went to the hospital to see if Molly had been there, but there was no sign of her. Desperate, she drove to Molly's boyfriend Stephen Lucas's house. When she knocked on the door, a sleepy Stephen answered and assured her he had no idea where she was. Molly and Stephen had a cut on his lip and a fresh scar on his face. When asked about it, he gave different explanations. For some, he said he tripped and hurt himself on the door, and for others, he claimed his lip split because of the cold. These conflicting stories raised some eyebrows, but the police didn't initially see him as the main suspect. However, a concerning detail was that Molly's flip-flops were neatly placed next to the lifeguard chair. It suggested that she had left barefoot. If she had chosen to leave on her own, she would have put on her flip-flops. The local police, who weren't used to dealing with this kind of case, started to realize they were facing something bigger than just a simple disappearance. Since the town was small and pretty much crime-free, they asked the Massachusetts State Police for help. Meanwhile, Molly's brother, John Jr., got the news about his sister's disappearance while he was at work. Hesitating, he ran to the lake. When he got there, he saw the police were already on the scene, debating whether Molly had gone into the water and might have drowned. That didn't make any sense, though. Molly was an experienced swimmer who knew the lake like the back of her hand. Her brother, who had also worked as a lifeguard, refused to accept that possibility. Without waiting for permission, he jumped into the water fully clothed and desperately searched every corner for hours, searching for a clue until the police stopped him from continuing the water search. Over 20 officers were involved in the search of the lake with boats, diving gear, and search dogs, but Molly was still missing. Friends, neighbors, and volunteers gathered around to look for clues, combing through paths, streets, and clearings nearby. But as night fell, all civilians were asked to pull back. Only the police remained, equipped with flashlights to keep searching through the night. As the search efforts stalled in the morning, a much larger task force was assembled. John's dad used his connections in the justice system to get extra help. K9 units and even helicopters with infrared sensors flew over the area, searching every inch of Warren. But there was still no sign of Molly. The intense search continued in the following days, with posters of Molly's picture being put up all over the city and surrounding areas. News reports soon gained nationwide attention. The police returned to the lake to search for evidence that could shed light on the disappearance, but there was a big problem. The crime scene was already completely wrecked. On the first day, when people noticed Molly was missing, dozens of people rushed to the spot. They touched her things, walked around her chair, and altered the scene. If there had been a valuable clue there, it was gone. Probably already lost, but investigators started developing a theory. If Molly had been kidnapped, how could the kidnapper have taken her away unnoticed? The answer might lie in a detail that few noticed: an inconspicuous path leading to a paved road less than 600 meters from her workplace. This spot provided the ideal conditions for a criminal to operate without being seen. If someone had been able to lure her there, they could have taken her into. Cars can be forced and made to disappear in just a few minutes, but why would Molly choose that route? The investigators looked into the items left behind. Her first aid kit was open, which suggested a new theory. What if the kidnapper pretended to be injured to lure Molly in? As a lifeguard, her instincts might have pushed her to help someone in need. If a man approached her claiming to be hurt and needing assistance, she might have left her post. That's the theory. It also explains that the perpetrator probably knew Molly's routine. It wasn't her first week on the job, she had been there for a few days, and someone could have been watching her during that time, waiting for the right moment. Then Magi remembered something her mother had told her about a disturbing incident on the morning of June 26, 2000, the day before Molly disappeared. Magi noticed something unusual when she dropped her daughter off at work. A white car was parked there with an unknown person inside. The guy was eyeing her strangely, smoking a cigarette and watching her every move. You could feel the discomfort right away. There was something in his gaze that made Magi anxious. Instead of just leaving, she stayed in the car for a few minutes to size up the situation. Molly got out, took her position, and waved to her mum to let her know everything was fine, but the guy just stood there, staring at them. To calm her mum down, Molly figured he might just be a local fisherman, but still, Magi decided to wait a bit longer. He stayed near his daughter a bit longer until more people showed up. The guy hung around for a few minutes, then got in his car and drove off. After Molly went missing, Magi reported the incident to the police. They put together a suspect profile based on her description: a white man about 50 years old with grey hair, dark eyes, and a moustache. The sketch was shared in newspapers, news reports, and even on national TV. Hundreds of tips started pouring in from different cities across the US, but the problem was that the guy had a really ordinary look, so many people resembled him, and the police couldn't find any solid evidence to identify him. Meanwhile, investigators were wondering if the kidnapper might not be a stranger. Molly was well liked in the community and known by many, and the lack of signs of a struggle suggested that she might have known the guy who approached her. The investigation then took a new turn, looking into friends, co-workers, and close acquaintances. Family members were questioned, and at first, the spotlight was on Ed Fett, Molly's boss and the head of the park commission, but his alibi checked out. Then they turned their attention to St. C., Molly's boyfriend. Stephen had cuts on his face and lip, and his explanations for his injuries didn't add up. Plus, he showed no interest in helping with the search. A lie detector test temporarily cleared him, but without any solid evidence, the police couldn't take further action against him since there were no concrete suspects. The Molly case started to cool down despite investigations and checking out numerous leads, but there were no witnesses or solid evidence. The police looked into local sex offenders, former criminals, and even old cases that Molly's dad, John, had worked on as a justice officer. They also considered the possibility of revenge against him, but ultimately there wasn't any proof. Then, in 2021, a new case caught the authorities' attention regarding another disappearance. 7 years earlier, Holly Pirinen's case had shocking similarities to Molly's. In 1990, 10-year-old Holly disappeared while playing in her grandmother's backyard in a town just 20 kilometers from Warren. Her body was found months later, but the culprit was never identified. Holly and Molly had similar physical traits and vanished under similar circumstances. Another weird thing, shortly after Holly disappeared, a 10-year-old wrote. A girl wrote a letter to the victim's family expressing her sorrow and sympathy, saying she wanted to help in the search for justice. That girl was Molly, and now, 7 years later, she had also disappeared. The similarities between the cases prompted the police to investigate whether the two crimes were connected, but without new evidence, that link remained officially unconfirmed. Time went on, the case grew cold, and the hope of finding Molly faded. But then, in 2003, years after her disappearance, an unexpected discovery reignited the investigation. In May 2003, a hunter found a piece of clothing partially buried and covered with leaves in a remote, hard-to-reach area in Palmer, a town next to Warren. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was a blue swimsuit, the exact one Molly had worn on the day she went missing. Without hesitation, he notified the police. The swimsuit was secured and sent to a specialized lab for analysis. Quickly, a part went to the state police and another to the FBI. With this new lead, search efforts in the nearby woods were back on. A massive task force was organized, involving over 180 state, federal, and local officers, making it the largest search operation in Massachusetts history. Every inch of the forest was combed through, but Molly was still missing. Then, on June 9, 2003, 3 years after she disappeared, what everyone had feared finally happened. Fragments of bones were found, a total of 26 pieces were recovered. Even though it wasn't a complete skeleton, it was enough to confirm the identity. Days later, the DNA analysis revealed what the Bish family had feared: the bones belonged to Molly Bish. She was dead. Her remains were buried on August 2, 2003, the day she would have turned 20. But a big mystery remained: the condition of the bones didn't allow for a clear determination of the cause of death. There were no clues that could identify the perpetrator, and the case remained unsolved until a new suspect came into play: Rodney Stanger. In February 2008, the police made progress when they considered Rodney, a violent man with a long criminal history, as a suspect. He lived in Southbridge, Massachusetts, near the crime scene, and moved to Florida a year after Molly disappeared, where he continued his criminal activities. He got arrested in 2008 for killing his girlfriend, Crystal Morrison. It was noted that he had given detailed info about Molly's disappearance before that. Plus, he drove a white car, just like the one that was seen near Molly's vanishing the day before. He was also a fisherman and hunter, and he knew the woods where Molly's remains were found. Despite these clues, he confessed to killing his girlfriend but denied any connection to Molly. Without solid evidence, he was never formally charged, and there were others involved too. In June 2021, the district attorney announced they were looking into a new suspect, Frank Samner, a man with a long criminal record. However, he had already passed away in 2016 and couldn't be questioned. For over 20 years, the police had been tracking a mysterious man in a white car who was spotted the day before Molly disappeared. New analyses are now raising the question of whether they might have been looking at the wrong person. The official theory says the kidnapper arrived when the crime happened, grabbed Molly somehow, and then quickly disappeared. But time series analyses suggest the perpetrator might have already been lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. There's a path that connects the beach to a cemetery, and from a certain point, someone could see both Molly's lifeguard chair and the park entrance. If the attacker had been there, he would have known exactly when to act without being noticed. This theory rules out the guy in the white car as the main suspect, which means the real murderer might never be identified. Furthermore, investigators now believe that the place where Molly's remains were found wasn't necessarily the crime scene. The bones were scattered over 500 meters, showing signs that animals had moved them. This suggests that the perpetrator hid the body somewhere else first. Later, they might have taken her into the woods to mess with the investigation. If this theory is true, the police have been looking for clues in the wrong places for years and targeting suspects who could be innocent. The biggest mystery now is, if the killer of Molly wasn't the guy in the white car, then who is it? And worse, is he still out there? The only certainty is that the Molly Bish case is still unsolved. What do you think happened to Molly? Share your thoughts, leave a comment and share your theory. Don't forget to like the channel, subscribe, and turn on notifications. There are plenty more mysteries waiting to be solved, so check out our earlier videos too. See you in the next case.